About an hour and a half. Almost two weeks.
It's about 90 minutes.
We had Klaus Kinski last week, so we went on and on and on.
Klaus Kinski.
Klaus Kinski.
Yeah, he was here, and
we covered his films last week.
He's dead.
I know, but we just covered his films.
But not me. I bought him at an auction, and he's here next to me.
We showed a bunch of his trailers and posters, and
He was an interesting guy.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another thrilling episode of the Spaghetti Westerns podcast. I am your host, Jay Jennings, and every time I'm here, we would be remiss if we didn't introduce our all-knowing co-host, Mr. Tom Betts. Hi, Tom.
Hi, Jay. Just a sidekick, not all-knowing.
No, you're the brains behind this thing. Everybody knows that.
Our guest this week is all-knowing compared to me.
Oh, well, that's debatable, but yeah, I mean, who would know more than our guest today? Maybe Sir Christopher?
Maybe.
But let's ask him himself, the one, the only Kevin Grant. Hi, Kevin.
Hello, nice to be here.
Glad to have you.
Yeah, we're honored to have you, the author of what Tom and I consider to be the Spaghetti Western Bible, Any Gun Can Play. You're very modest. I think you've done a couple interviews where you said, well, this isn't the end-all. Tom and I do think it is the end-all book. We're showing our versions of it. Tom, we're both signed by you and Franco Nero. You had Franco at the book signing, didn't you?
Yeah, that's right. That last time I'd met him, I'd spoken to him on the phone a few times. Arranged the foreword, and we did an interview. But that was my first time meeting him in the flesh.
Wow!
I'm a bit awestruck.
I bet there's Django right there.
That's right.
Yeah, he's a very cool guy.
Of course he is. Yeah, hopefully we'll get him on the show one of these days. The first question I was going to ask, we mentioned it at the beginning. Since you put this book together, how many hours, months, years of research? Who would know more about spaghetti westerns? I mean, if there was a Jeopardy of spaghetti westerns, Kevin, do you think you'd miss any questions?
Oh, I'm sure I would.
Like what? What would stump you?
Well, I don't know. Maybe some of the more niche areas, that I may have probably forgotten by now. East European westerns and some of that stuff. Yeah, I mean, there was a hell of a lot of information to corral together.
Right.
When making the book.
Well, I want to ask you, as I said, Tom and I consider your book the Spaghetti Western Bible. I mean, there's a lot of books have come out. Sir Christopher Frayling, Ulrich Bruckner, your good friend, Clark Hotchkiss, all great knowledgeable authors. But there's something about your book. Well, the information, the photos, the posters, the running times, the different versions. I mean, how long did it take you to put together from start to finish?
Well, it was a part-time project, so probably about at least 10 years, I think, from inception and first interview to actually getting it published. That wasn't all, researching and writing time. There were a couple of years when it was in production, but production was delayed a few times. Publication was delayed for reasons outside my hands. But yeah, a good few years. I'd say at least a decade from beginning to finish.
So about 2002 to 2012, about.
Well, probably more like 2000 actually. It came out in 2011. So yeah, I think about 2000.
So 10 years.
First interviews. Yeah, about that.
Wow. And in the book, go ahead, Tom.
Let me ask, how long before that did the idea come to do a book?
Well, probably about 4 or 5 years when I was seriously considering it, because it wasn't actually too long before then that I started writing reviews. For people like Craig Ledbetter at European Trash Cinema, one of my very earliest editors, and then I had the good fortune to hook up with Clark Hotchkiss, still a very good friend, who was producing his magazine Blood, Money and Vengeance over here in the UK. So I was writing for him. So I'd probably say 4 or 5 years before I started writing the book, just thinking, well, I'm thinking about these movies a lot. I've always enjoyed them since I was a very young boy. Let's just try and collate these thoughts together and actually do something hopefully substantial with it.
Was Tom's Westerns Italiana? Do you have any issues of that as reference?
I have numerous issues. Yes, indeed. It's one of the great trailblazing publications. Before almost anybody else, there was Tim Ferranti and then Tom Betts,
right,
doing Westerns dell'Italiana, and they had all these amazing interviews. First-hand interviews, not just with, probably mostly with the American contingent, but not solely. Right. And a lot of information that then you couldn't get anywhere.
So let me.
This was before the internet.
Right. Oh yeah. There's no doubt. We're Tom and Tim's mag. So let me ask you then. So luckily you did write it during the, I guess the internet was still around. It's not like if you wrote it in the 90s, you would have had to gone to libraries and go through catalogs. So did you use other books, or what were some of the things you used for reference? I mean, did you have them all open on a carpet in your living room, or with notes and index cards?
Wasn't quite like that, but
okay.
It's a thing. There weren't that many books in English that were relevant. On the actual subject of European westerns, there was Christopher Frayling's Spaghetti Westerns, his first book, which I'd probably got when I was about 11 or 12. And even though the tone of the writing was way above my head at that time, in being a serious academic gentleman, it was a revelation to me, because at that point I didn't know much more than the Clint Eastwood Dollars movies and a few others that had shown up on British TV. So to have this book, which alluded to so many more films, that was a real eye-opener. And also I have to mention Lawrence Stagg and Tony Williams' Opera of Violence, a wonderful book. Again, that was a British publication. And those were really the only two substantial books on the subject in English that I knew of at the time.
Right.
Other than that, as I got more into the subject, I sort of read around it more. I plenty of books on Italian cinema in general and Italian genre cinema, and other European popular cinema, Spanish cinema. I read about the Mexican Revolution to get more of a grounding for that subject, to try and get into it. But yeah, it was when I started writing it was the early days of the internet really breaking through. So right. I was able to use that to an extent, but it was mostly Westerns dell'Italiana and a few.
Let me ask you, outside of research, here's the big question. You actually had to watch a ton of these films. Back then, though, unlike today, where it's readily available from multiple DVD and Blu-ray companies, how were you able to get your hands on 400, 500, 600 films? Are you gonna? Honestly, you probably couldn't watch them all. Some of them are probably from second or third-hand info. But how many spaghetti westerns did you actually watch during that 10-year period, or rewatch and then pause and then go back again?
Well, it would have been in the mid-hundreds. I'd say at least 400.
Did you own them, or did you borrow the films, or how did you see them?
Most of them I owned or had traded. This was the early days of tape trading.
True, I was a member of that community. Yeah.
Yeah, that whole scene was invaluable. So it was around about the same time, early to mid '90s, when we discovered lots of people around the country, around the world, who had similar interests, not just spaghetti westerns, but all kinds of cult movies which you just couldn't find anywhere else. So that's where most of them came from. 10th generation copies, hand scanned, terrible print quality, huge Greek subtitles usually across the bottom of the screen.
Different versions, different cuts, different running times.
Exactly. Yeah.
You had to substantiate all of that. Maybe you had the European version, but maybe not the American cut, which America is very famous for cutting out minutes at a time.
And then you ran into different titles that you're watching this film, and all of a sudden, Johnny Garco's calls one thing, and the information you've got, he was called something else. but the American
Exactly, yeah.
title is a video title that the video producer made up that Kevin's got no inclination on what this could possibly be, and you start scratching your head because nothing makes sense. So you have to watch the whole movie to figure out what you're watching.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. Very confusing because they were, as you know, a lot of these things were just dumped out onto home video, and what's on the box would not correspond necessarily to what's in the movie, including the title.
Right.
They could have a different title on the box sometimes and a different title on the screen. So that didn't help, certainly in terms of research.
Right. So before we get to our further questions, I'm going to show a little quick clip for the folks at home who, I don't know, who wouldn't have this book. You should go get it, whether it's online or whatever. I mean, it's essential reading. I mean, that's why it's called the Essential Guide to Euro Western. So let's take a quick look what it would look like if you had the book and you flip through it, and it kind of would look a little like this. Awesome as always. It's a page turner. Great graphics, great setup. Who helped you put together the format of the book, if anyone?
Well, all the credit there goes to Harvey at Fab Press. He's a terrific designer. I mean, the illustrated material, a lot of that was mine. Some of it was supplied by other people. Tom sent some illustrations. Some other friends that I knew on the fan circuit supplied illustrations. But design-wise, I mean, I had some. I was giving some insight into the cover, and if I had suggestions for the interior, that was fine. But I was perfectly happy to trust Harvey with that because all Fab Press's books are immaculate. He's a great designer. So it did say there was a hiatus when I submitted it to Fab Press for publication.
What type of a reception did you get when you contacted Fab or whatever and suggested what you wanted to do?
Well, ironically, Fab was probably one of the last publishers I contacted. I mean, I knew Harvey from a good few years back. I'd met him, and we had a sort of circle of friends, fellow film fans. Among them was Harvey, but for some reason I didn't think that he'd be that interested in a book on spaghetti westerns. He was mostly doing horror movies and things like that. So there weren't many publishers that I approached, probably 3 or 4. A couple of them did express an interest in the early days, but it was my naivety, I think, because it was my first book, that I approached them at a very early stage of writing. And of course they said, can you send us 2 chapters? Can you send us this and that? And at the time I couldn't.
Sure.
And then, I did get back to a few people 2 or 3 years down the line, but, maybe that person who had expressed an interest had then departed the company,
Right.
So then I had the idea, well, let's just approach Harvey. He makes great looking books. And, he was really interested. He was really enthusiastic. I think because he recognized the cult appeal of spaghetti westerns. They have as much cult appeal as, I don't know, Jess Franco horror movies, for example.
Exactly, yeah.
There's a big worldwide following. So he really appreciated that. And also the graphic side, the visuals, he knew they'd be fantastic because, the best European westerns, they had great visuals, great looking actors, and the poster art, all this is terrific. So yeah, he was really enthusiastic about it. So I was fortunate there to find him. But that was quite a late stage.
Good.
So let me ask you then, Tom can show a couple copies. You cut your teeth though on Clark's magazine beforehand, kind of getting your feet wet. So did Clark ask you to write a few articles, or were you involved at the beginning of the magazine?
I think
Blood, Money, and Vengeance.
Yeah, I think maybe he'd published about one of them. and I can't even remember how we got in touch, but I think he got in touch with me through a mutual contact, and because he's probably read some of my writing elsewhere on spaghetti westerns. I've written for another couple of fanzines. I've written for another couple of fanzines in the UK, the Western Reviews, and and because he was also in the UK, we met up in London and became good friends quickly, and that's how I got in. He was about 1 or 2 issues into his magazine, I think, and then I came on board at that point.
Would you think you would have wrote the book if you wouldn't have cut your teeth on the mag, or did it set the stage to come later?
Well, it probably would have come anyway, because I'd been pretty obsessed with the movies for a long time. But that was a very important magazine for me in terms of writing regularly on the one subject. So it really helped me get into my stride, I think, on the writing front, specifically about these movies.
Oh, I'm glad you did. I mean, as I said, it's a checklist, it's a guide, it's everything from usually some of these books, a little long and a little long-winded. Even Sir Christopher, we'd admit, as much as we admire him, sometimes he's like lecturing to us. And yeah, some of this stuff when you're younger can go right over your head. But you're taking it from almost from like a fan/researcher perspective, and I love that because that's what I am. So it's a very smooth, very easy on the eyes. The combination of poster artwork and your information, the way you have it set up is just so nice and easy. As opposed to another of our favorites, Tom, the Westerns all'Italiana, the 3 books that are tough to get. Half of it's in English, half of it's in Italian. You got to skip 3 pages back to find out where you ended on the last page. So yours is...
Then they don't give you an index until the 3rd issue. So you've already got 2 issues with no index on how to find anything until issue number 3. Yeah.
Right. So your book is, I cannot, fawn over it any more than I have. So that's why we're just so thrilled to have you on. Let me ask you a little bit of...
Very kind.
Thank you. So let me ask you your beginnings. I was looking through your bio. I was very young. We had LA television. We had 5 channels. That they would show movies at late night in the afternoon, and that's where I caught it as a kid. Tom as well, but Tom also went to the theater himself and saw some of these classics. But you were 8 years old when you saw A Fistful of Dollars?
Something like that. That's my best guess. Yeah, 8 or 9. I would have been.
Were you at home on the telly it was on?
Yeah, it would have been on TV. I guess I was probably already a Clint Eastwood fan. I was from a very early age, so I'd probably seen some of his movies already, but nothing like this. This film comes on, and it's just anybody who's seen Fistful of Dollars knows you can appreciate immediately that it's a break from any kind of Western that came before. I didn't appreciate all its qualities at the time. I probably couldn't have articulated why it was so different, but much of it centered around Clint Eastwood himself. That ultra cool persona that he had, particularly in that film, and just the whole look and feel of it just really captivated me.
And you said the opening credits kind of blew you away as a kid, right?
Well, yeah, because what kind of credits were those? I'd never seen anything like that before. Yeah, I was just used to the standard scrolling credits from American cinema, British movie, TV, and then here was this wild sort of almost pop art style of credits, and it just announced itself very loudly as something different. And the music, obviously, just everything about it was so strikingly odd, especially to an 8-year-old impressionable boy who loved westerns anyway. But then there was this bizarre offshoot of the western. So yeah.
What westerns did you like as a kid before you saw spaghetti westerns?
Well, pretty much anything. I mean, in the UK we had even fewer channels. There were 3 main channels for a long time, and but westerns were they were a Saturday afternoon default.
So are you talking Roy Rogers, Gene Autry, or John Wayne, or?
I was not the singing cowboys. my mum used to like those, but no, that wasn't for me.
Gary Cooper.
Yeah, more the sort of the Gary Cooper, James Stewart, Adam Ladd type, Henry Fonda. yeah, but the westerns of that stripe, and John Wayne as well, were on quite often. So I would see all those things, westerns, gangster movies. These are all my favorite genres still, and because they were on TV often when I was growing up. But there was certainly nothing like this film when I first
Right.
came back.
So go ahead, Tom.
Let me ask you something about British TV then and now. Then, when you were growing up, they just programmed British. Everything was in English. It was all out
Everything was
of
in
the UK. Today, is it the same?
No. It's very different now. Because of the cable
Different
TV
nationalities
revolution.
coming. Yeah.
Yeah, you can watch TV from around the world. I mean, back then, yeah, you're right. Most things were strictly in English, but American films and TV series, I grew up on those.
Well, the reason I ask, being in LA, and Jake can vouch for this, we've got a huge Mexican population. So we had at
Right.
least 2 stations that broadcast Mexican movies, shows, all in Spanish. And I told Jay I saw Italian Westerns that were the English versions redubbed into Spanish, because they would come on the screen and it would say Fistful of Dollars. It
Right.
didn't say in Pugno de Dolari. It said Fistful of Dollars, Clint Eastwood. But then when the movie started, they'd all speak Spanish. So it wasn't like the Spanish version of Fistful of Dollars. It was the English version redubbed into Spanish. But I saw so many spaghetti westerns, this is late 60s, that I had read about, like what you said with Frayling and Tony Williams and stuff like that, that as soon as they came on, I recognized them. And I didn't care if they were in Turkish or Russian or whatever. I had
Yeah.
to watch them because they were full screen color, DVD type prints. So yeah, I got to see some of those.
But Tom, the difference is it was Fistful of Dollars meets Santo.
Yeah. Well, Kevin, the problem is they would be off air at 11 o'clock at night. If they had 1 minute to go in the film, they wouldn't go to 11:01. It would just at 11
Cut.
o'clock,
Oh, really?
yeah, cut. Yeah. So most of the time that would be the credits or whatever. So I really didn't care.
Yeah.
I had that. But every once in a while they would cut, and it still had a minute of film to go, so you'd miss the very end.
Right.
That's disrespectful.
Yeah.
Isn't it though?
Really.
So Kevin, let me ask you. So growing up, then, when you were in high school and on to college, was it still a hobby at this point, or did you go out and consciously research spaghetti westerns?
It was still very much a hobby. It was really when that tape trading scene kicked in that I was able to get hold of some of these films that I'd only seen in the opera Violence.
But what would you trade for to get that? What would you trade for? Like, what would somebody want that you had so you can get a spaghetti western?
My body. I didn't get any films out of that, actually, just a few Fidani.
Oh man!
No, he would trade Sheriff for Fractured Jaw, and Carry On Cowboy.
No, I mean, did you have like Giallos or Peplum maybe to trade or something?
Yeah, so similar. If you weren't trading, then you could always purchase some. Some people would just sell them,
Right.
sell copies, and I was quite happy with that because they weren't very expensive at the time. And when I did have enough of a collection, then I could trade copies then back and forth. But so I spent my pocket money on a fair few spaghetti western tapes.
Well,
Yeah,
the other
so
thing,
did
if you
I,
had
yeah.
a VHS machine, Jay, you'd get a copy that you were looking for, a rare one, and you'd copy it for somebody else. Then you had to trade.
Right. So you had a fourth generation. You turn into a fifth generation,
Right.
Yeah.
which is blurry as heck, pixelated. The screen was over like 3 inches to the left, so it was black on the right. No, I did that for years and years, trading bootlegs, or gray market stuff. Let's get back to your book for a second, Kevin. So great research and stuff, but this also gave you a chance to interview some icons, or at least talk to, like Robert Wood and who are some of the people that you were able to speak to get some information about their movies?
Well, you mentioned Robert Woodson. He was the very first guy I interviewed. He was very generous with his time. I think we spoke three times maybe, and at least 2 hours each time on the phone. He was very happy to speak. I'd read some interviews with him in Tom's magazine. He was very gracious, and happy to share his memories. He could be quite dismissive, in a humorous way of a lot of the movies he made in Italy back then. But he was happy to share his memories, and that's the gold mine. And I made Richard Harrison was another. He was very generous with his time. Brett Halsey, I was particularly pleased to get hold of Franco Nero, Gianni Garco, Gianfranco Parolini,
George Hilton,
and well, a good few others, Leonard Mann.
were these phone interviews basically?
Most of them were phone interviews. I also did some where I sent
Letter writing?
off. Yeah, I sent the questions off and I got tape back. I got a tape back from Sergio Donati, for example. He recorded
nice.
his answers onto cassette for me in English and sent them back to him. Now that's just how he preferred to do it. Enzo Castellari I spoke to on the phone, Aldo Sambrel. Fortunately, all these guys had near perfect English because I could speak a little bit of Italian at the time, but not fluently, not enough to have a detailed conversation about filmmaking and so on. That was great. That was great. It was to speak.
They were all still alive, which was fantastic.
A lot of them are. Some of them have passed, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Let me interject here because I did what Kevin did. We would tape interviews, even live, and we would dictate them back and listen to them, and all of a sudden they're talking about something. I haven't got a clue what he just said. When we first interviewed Tony Anthony, they were talking about Gaudix. I hadn't been to Spain. I had no idea what Gaudix was, and I had to look them up. So you have to re-listen to these tapes over and over and over, and hopefully you have a friend like Clark or whatever that was into it that could say, oh, he's talking about such and such, or I think this is what he means, to get a complete sentence out of it. And it wasn't their fault. It was just a matter that we didn't know what they were saying, and we weren't there, especially Kevin getting a tape in the mail, to ask him, what did you mean by this? It was just, one-way street. So that was
Right.
that was fun in those days.
Yeah, because now, I'm our booker here at the show, and anybody you can think of who's still alive, I've actually had contact with, but they're a little bit up in age, and of course there's an English barrier. Even though Tom and I are like, well, then how did you make a couple American films? Well, it's maybe they learned their lines phonetically. So maybe they really didn't understand what they're saying, but they just, during rehearsal and reading the script. But I think when you did yours, Kevin, they were still alive, relatively younger than they are today. And so maybe they could still grasp what was going on. Because a couple of spaghetti western stars I've spoken to have kindly bowed out because they say their lack of English wouldn't be up to standard. I'm like, it doesn't matter. I'll just put the camera on you and I'll read your bio for the whole show. We just want you on the show.
Kevin did it at a great time where the end of their career had been a gap for a while. And now all of a sudden someone was interested in them and their careers of the past, so they were more likable to talk about it. Where today it's like, oh, that's so far back, I don't remember. I don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah, either they're a little bitter or they just don't remember. And
They don't want to be
that's their prerogative. So you didn't get anything like that? Were there any spaghetti western stars who didn't want to be talked to or mentioned in the book? Oh.
No, everybody that I approached was agreeable.
Okay, stop right here. Jay, you're no longer the booker. Let Kevin book.
You're now the booker.
This was at that time, though. This was
Yeah,
at
okay.
that specific time.
All right.
So I think what Tom said a few minutes ago is probably correct in that I'm sure if it had been, 5-10 years before that, maybe when some of these guys were making different movies and you approached them and said, can I speak to you about this Dimopolo Fadani Western you made in 1969, they would say, why would I want to speak about that now? I'm working with so-and-so, or I'm busy now. But it was a time when a lot of them weren't very...
They were retired.
Yeah,
a lot of them retired or between jobs, and there hadn't been that interest in them, specifically as icons. There were certain period of filmmaking, a certain style of filmmaking. So yeah, I'm sure that, you know, everybody's ego likes reassuring from time to time, you know, that people remember them and admire them. So that would have helped, I'm sure.
You mentioned about the Americans, and Jay and I have run into this, where we run into an American actor that did, say an Ernest Borgnine, big name in American films, but you go see him at a fan fest or something like that, and they all want to talk about the Wild Bunch or whatever.
Or the Poseidon Adventure.
But if you go up to him and talk about, you know, a spaghetti western that he was in, his eyes light up because no one ever asks him about that. You know,
Yeah.
Now they're open to you. You know about that film, and you know, oh yeah, I know. You know, George Hilton or and they're.
It's like a
very
life
interested.
serum. That's like you've given them life. Like, well, you remember those?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, Steve Reeves was the same, right, Tom?
Oh yeah.
Everybody wanted to say, hey, Hercules, and he just didn't look happy.
Right.
And then you say, you know, what was it, last Ride into Hell, Tom, or
Long
Long Ride into Hell?
long day into hell or wrong. And he didn't have any pictures of any cowboy. And I stepped looking around. He said, "What can I help you?" And I said, "Well, I was hoping you had a cowboy picture from, you know, The Longest Ride or whatever." He's, "Oh, you like westerns?" I said, "Yeah." So he reaches down and picks out a head frame of that film, and he didn't even charge me for it because I was, you know, I talked to him about a western, not a Hercules movie.
Yeah.
So maybe
Actually,
that's why they
the one
talk to you,
person-
Kevin.
The one person that I do remember who actually he didn't actually turn down the opportunity, but it was Gordon Mitchell. I made touch with him. I didn't speak to him. I think it was just through letters at the time. And he would have, I think he would have done an interview, but he wanted some advance payment. You know.
Oh, cool.
really?
You know what?
Oh,
Some
wow.
of them do.
At that stage, I was still very much in the research phase, and I don't think I even had a publisher at that point. So I really wasn't able to go through that. He did supply me with some nice material about his studio, you know, and
Yeah,
other
Cave,
things
yeah.
related to that period. But we never got around to doing the interview just for that reason.
You know, some do want to get paid. You're absolutely. You know, I don't know if you've heard of my Telly Savalas story that Tom's probably sick of hearing. I met him, and I wanted to talk to him about, you know, reason to live, reason to die, or whatever, something like that. And Sonny and Jed, hey, what do you, how much you got, kid? How much do I got? He wouldn't talk to me about his films unless I paid him. I still love Telly, but I remember that as clear as day.
Should have offered him a lollipop.
Yeah.
Right. Hey, baby. But let's change the subject for a second. Besides A Fistful, Kevin, name us some of your other kind of spaghetti westerns that you always enjoy watching, or before you were able to see them, maybe you were looking forward to getting that tape. What are some of the ones that you recall that you enjoy over others?
You mean today or?
Oh yeah, like today. Or what are your random top 10? What are some of your favorite spaghetti westerns? Would you say?
Okay, all right. Well, it changes all the time, and I'm going to cheat by including whole sets of films.
Okay.
So all the Leone movies, obviously, would be in there. I'd say the Sultana series as a whole, the official Sultana series. Django, Big Gun Down, Face to Face, The Great Silence, Blind Man, My Name is Nobody, Day of Anger, Death Rides a Horse, Sabata, Django Kill, if I haven't mentioned that already. Bullet for the General, Vengeance is Mine, we were just talking, Bullet for Sandovaldi on this board-game movie. Price of Power, God Forgives I Don't. You know, there's a good selection there. Arizona Colt, Bandidos, I could go on.
Yeah.
What about some of the unofficial Django films, or some of those?
Yeah.
Like Django's Cut Price Corpses.
Yeah, perhaps not that. That's not at the top of the list. I have to admit.
That begs the question: when did you see Django? Do you remember the first time you saw it? Because it was banned in the UK, right?
It was, and
It was here too.
I think I may have been fortunate to see that on the big screen the very first time I saw it, because it was re-released over here in about 1990 maybe, or early 90s. A company, I can't remember what they were called now, but they bought the rights to Django and a few others like Requiescant.
Well, you like us must have read about it and heard about it for a number of
Oh,
years.
sure, yeah. I was
And then-
desperate to see it. Desperate.
Yes.
I read
So,
about it in Christopher Frayling's book and I thought this sounds just amazing.
and I explained to my son, I said, you got to remember when we watched this, it was 10 or 15 years after it had been made, and we're watching it, with our eyes back to 66.
Yeah,
As what we would have seen then, not today compared to Terminator or whatever, where they mow people down left and right. But that was like jaw dropping.
yeah. So I think I was fortunate enough to see that the very first time on a big screen in a nice print in a cinema in London. There weren't many people there, and most people were laughing at this.
Really?
Some of the English dub dialogue is
Gotcha.
leaves a lot to be desired in Django. And I prefer it in the Italian with the subtitles.
Oh, you do? I see. I'm a purist. I don't. Okay, if it doesn't have a high pitch hiss, I want to hear the audio in English. I really do. But subtitles are fine. It doesn't ruin it for me. That's funny you mentioned that because I asked the debate because I have different versions. I have like 800. I have almost every spaghetti western you can think of. 30 years of collecting, and sometimes do I want to watch the English one with the high pitch hiss, or do I want to watch the one with the subtitles? But you say you're a subtitle guy.
Not all the time. It depends on the movie. It depends on the movie. I just think, some of the English dub dialogue in Django in particular.
Well, you mean when he sees the three guys who are about to whip the woman? It's none of your business what I'm doing here.
That kind of stuff, and some of the exchanges between Django and Loredana Nishak's character. I'm glad you think I'm a real woman, Django, and all this kind of stuff. It's much easier to take that seriously with the subtitles, but it depends on the quality of the English script. I think. I'm certainly not. More often than not, I will watch the English dub versions. But if it seems superior with the subtitles, translated from the original, then I'll watch that.
What about the ones that don't have subtitles? Those are always fun. There's nothing. You just have to watch it in its native language.
Well, yeah. There are still a few like that, even today, that fans haven't got around to adding their own subtitle to. But the fan scene now it's astonishing. The effort that people put into to making a reconstructed composite version of a film. From 3 different sources. So you have the longest possible version, and they added subtitles to 4 minutes of the movie where it's only in Italian. But they've added 4 minutes of English subtitles. These things exist now, and it's amazing the time and effort that fans are making, which in itself shows that spaghetti westerns still have that fervent fan following.
Oh, they do.
I told Jay back in the day, Bill Connolly and Ali Lamage were like that. They'd get 15 different copies in different languages to string it out and put in 5 seconds of this scene that's not in this version, but they couldn't do anything with the language. So all of a sudden the language would change, or they didn't have the process to make it look good on the screen. It'd be like you said, 10th generation gray, and then it would be crystal clear, and then it would, that type of thing. But you could see all these different versions in one long.
Yeah. Well, isn't it the big gun down, Tom? Isn't all of a sudden when, if I'm not mistaken, Lee's talking to like that landowner, the film just goes 10 minutes in Italian.
Yeah. In the beginning, when the 3 bullets, that was always left out. So some of these, we were glad. I don't care what language it was in. It was, I never saw that before. Only in a still that was in like Kevin's book, but it was never in the film that we had.
Right. So let me ask you, Kevin, what do you think? Tom and I have debated this. We have our different years. What do you think was the heyday or the best 3 or 5 year period at the spaghetti westerns height before it started going downhill and introducing the Trinity movies in the early 70s? What do you think was its heyday?
Well, to include for a few dollars more, I would say sort of maybe second half of 1965 up to the end of 69. All the classics, you can really find in that period. I think the ones that really still stand up today and the most innovative, during in that period.
I said 65 to 69 too, Tom, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken.
I think
Tom,
60
what are your years again?
Well, my 68 is like the peak year that the most spaghetti westerns ever came out. And it was like 30, 40 above what it was in 67 and again in 69. But like Kevin, I'd like to include that too, but probably my peak years is 67 to 69, those 3 years. Because then 70, Trinity comes out. And even though it peaked, it was because the comedy gave it a new life. Because whether we like it or not, it created interest in the theater-going public in Italy. And then after 70, 71, it started to peter out.
Yeah, and certainly in terms of creativity and originality. But,
well, and it's a shame because you get into like 76, 77, where you've got, Keoma and A Man Called
California,
Silver Saddle, some of those, and they're great. They reestablished that hard hero that we like, and yet.
But they couldn't sustain it, Tom.
No, it just bang, it just ended. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, so what do you? Yeah, I was going to ask you, Kevin. What do you think?
Make enough money.
Yeah.
So So you think the reason for its not downfall, but for its slow descent into? I mean, do you think they just the well was dry? It was like 800 Euro westerns later. What else could they do? What do you think, Kevin?
I think that was it. More than even more than the advent of comedy westerns, which is, if we're just focusing on Italy as the center of the scene for a moment, then whenever they had a long-running and successful genre of film, whether it was spy films, no matter the popular genre, peplums, eventually they'd get tired, and the comedy specialists would make their parodies,
right?
And they'd send it up because they figured everyone's a bit fed up with this now. Let's just have some fun. The same thing happened with westerns. It lasted a lot longer than any of these other mini genres. Had a great run, but eventually they were going to send them up because they just couldn't take them seriously anymore. But even more than the comedies, I think it was just all those very dull westerns, supposedly serious westerns that came out in the early 70s, just retreads. And
made by great directors too.
Well, you say that.
Yeah.
Well, no, Corbucci, they all made a dud here and there,
Well, I was more thinking of the sort of the Fedani type director.
Oh no, we don't badmouth Miles Deem here, Kev.
I'm just saying.
Bianchini, yeah.
Yeah, and the Gianni Crea type. They made a lot of westerns which looked the same and didn't offer you anything. And most of the action was people riding around one particular quarry near Rome.
I was going to say
that was half the movie.
Yeah, the production values had completely depleted. They were using the old sets. They didn't dress them up. You walked into a saloon where there used to be 30 people in there in a bar fight. Now there was 2 saloon girls and 3 guys playing poker over on the side. That was it.
Yeah. And so there were just too many of these very cheap westerns which offered very little. I mean, they must have sold somewhere because they made a hell of a lot of them still. In 71, 72, there was still quite a lot of Italian, Spanish westerns being made that weren't outright comedies. So I think, just it ran out of ideas.
The Holy Ghost movies, right, Tom?
Yeah, the Holy Ghost.
I quite enjoy the first one of those, I have to say.
Yeah.
You don't like where he's a completely different person in the next one?
Give that one a miss.
He's like a colonel in the army or something, Tom?
Yeah. I mean, they just seized on the name, I think, didn't they? They seized on the name and just made a completely different story.
Well, we've talked before, and you know this. Every movie that Franco Nero was ever in, when he goes to Germany, he's Django. Django the Shark Hunter.
When he's not Django, he's Django. Yeah.
Yeah, they just used the name because everybody.
I mean, Keoma was called Django somewhere, Tom.
I'm sure it was. Yep.
Right. So, Tom, you also had an opinion on that. Tom, I think, believes we've had this discussion that Spain or the Spanish should have kept making spaghetti westerns, right, Tom?
No, my opinion is, Kevin, that I don't understand why the genre didn't go to Mexico.
Oh, okay.
Mexico had the same architecture as Spain. That's where it came from.
Yeah.
So the villages looked the same. They had an established film industry there. They were so close to having American actors come down there instead of going halfway around the world, 200 miles, and they're down in Durango, you know. And they did some Mexican westerns that copied spaghetti westerns, but they weren't the same. So I think if they'd have had a couple of directors that came over from Spain or Italy or whatever and kept the genre going, they could have done it for another 5-6 years and with no problem because they had everything there.
Yeah, it would have made a lot of sense. Yeah, yeah. But I just think I just think the torch had passed to other genres by that point. You know.
Yeah.
I mean, in the States as well, westerns were not anywhere near as popular as they had been 10 years before. So, yeah, times changed.
Yeah, well, they were thinking about what Get Mean and what is it, the film Spaghetti Western, and what, the Lemonade Kid, Tom?
Yeah, lemon. Well, the other thing I never understood was why didn't they make a black superhero cowboy?
Well, they did. Joshua, Tom.
Well, that wasn't a spaghetti western. I mean, they had Jim Brown, and they had Fred Williamson, and they had our buddy from Spartacus.
Jim Kelly.
Woody Strode. I mean, they could
Woody
have
Strode,
made,
yeah.
a whole version of a spaghetti western blaxploitation genre.
Yeah, we could have made a dozen of those. That's a great idea, Tom.
Well, I always thought they missed a great opportunity with Antonio Margheriti may take a hard ride with Jim Brown and Fred Williamson and Jim Kelly.
Yep.
And Lee Van Cleef, of course. Not a bad film, but there was an opportunity missed because none of their roles was particularly interesting. It wasn't gritty. It wasn't exploitative.
Yeah.
They could have done something more.
They had too many people in there. Too many stars.
Yeah.
They all try to share something instead of concentrating on one or two.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, missed opportunities.
I read the other day that in what's the Terrence Hill movie, Bud Spencer with Woody Strode? Is it Boot Hill?
Boot Hill.
That Woody is a bounty hunter in there. And I didn't pay attention. I must be too long since I've seen it, but he's asking about certain people. Apparently, he's a bounty hunter traveling with the circus. And I said, that'd have made, a spin-off of him being a bounty hunter, a black bounty hunter. That'd been cool.
Yeah.
And give him that gun he had once upon a time in the West, that Steve McQueen sawed-off rifle. That'd been unique. And the Duster would have been great.
He had one in the Revengers, Tom, didn't he?
Yeah, right. Revengers was, take off on that.
Right. So then let's move on to present day. Kevin, what have you been working on recently, or anything in the future that we should look forward to?
Well, my last book came out beginning of last year. It was published by McFarlane, one of your American publishers, about vigilante cinema. Vigilantes in popular cinema.
I wonder if you discussed Death Wish.
Look at that. Oh, he blocked it out.
It's on the cover. Inevitably it's on the cover.
One of my favorite films.
Yeah, that was another one of those projects.
Hey, punk, I'm a killer.
Similar to the spaghetti westerns when it was, it had been bubbling under in my mind for a long time, and I just got on with it. So there was that. There's another one that's with McFarlane now, which should be coming out next spring. Which is about the roots of film noir.
Oh.
Ooh, another favorite topic of mine.
Yeah, slightly different tack. I've got the kernel of an idea for another book, but it's just just seeding in my brain at the moment. I'm trying to keep busy. I'm trying to, because Any Gun Can Play took me such a long time. It was just a part-time project. It was very much.
We've heard rumors there's could be a rewrite of that. Any Gun Can Play, a revision. Remake.
Oh, Tom,
revision.
You're so funny.
It.
No, could never be remade.
No. What we're doing is there is a slight update because it's being republished because I think the hardback is sold out. So.
How many copies have you sold of that book? Do you have any idea?
I couldn't tell you the numbers because I can't remember how many were printed in the first place.
Gotcha.
I think the book's so good, you don't even need to revise it. I mean,
Well,
it's
Frayling didn't rewrite his book. He just added that addition in the beginning of some corrections, remember, of his book. So you don't have to.
I
rewrite
didn't
the
have to
book.
do too much. Sadly, the one section where I did a lot of
the
updating
actors.
was the obituary. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
because so many of them have died.
You
since
can
I
never
put that
keep up
together.
with that. I mean, there's going to be
No.
3 that's going to die before it goes to press.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So,
Especially with COVID the last year. I mean, there for a while, it was like 1 a week. It was like unbelievable. Yeah. Mm.
yeah, that was a sad task. But yeah, so that's I'm not quite sure when. I think he said in the summer he's going to be working on it properly. Maybe later this year there'll be a slightly updated version.
Will it be hardbound or paperback or both, or you don't know?
I think he's doing hardback to begin with, and then to see how it goes.
wow.
Yeah.
Good.
That's awesome. Tom, anything else you want to ask Kevin that's on the top of your head?
Well, what was the first spaghetti western you saw? Was it Fistful?
I think it must have been. Yeah, it must have been. And then I do remember, because as I said, we had 3 channels. You know, while I was that sort of age. You know,
Is that
before
BBC 1, 2, and 3?
well, we had BBC 1 and 2, and then ITV.
ITV, that's right.
Yeah, the commercial channel. So they were pretty rare, but I do remember at a very early stage there was a season of spaghetti westerns on BBC 2. It must have been, and, you know, they would show one on the same day every week. And I saw that was where I first saw They Call Me Trinity, where I first saw Sabata. A random selection, 3 or 4 they showed. I can't remember what else.
I guess.
Something like Day of Anger. They would pop up occasionally. Fistful was certainly the first one. I mean, it's the first one I certainly remember striking me in the face, you know, and just making all my senses tingle because I've never seen anything like it.
Did you
Right.
ever see the American TV release of Fistful of Dollars where they added the prologue
I've seen the
with
scenes.
Harry Dean Stanton?
Yes.
When
Yeah.
that first came on, I think it was on CBS TV, and of course we had TV Guide, and whenever they premiered a big movie like that, it'd be all over the TV Guide about the premiere of Fistful of Dollars. So I mean, I've seen it at the theater probably a dozen times by then or more, but I had to watch it on TV. And when that thing came on, Jay, I'm going, what is this? This is
Well, you know, they obviously hired Tony Anthony to be the stand-in.
the big thing. Is, when they walk him up the stairs, the 2 guards.
He's like
are
5'5".
a foot and a half taller than he is. You know? I'm like, holy mackerel, what is this? And I thought at first I'm thinking, well, there's missing scenes. I haven't seen. And at the end, the only good part is when he's putting his gear on at the horse putting shells in his gun and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm going, oh no, why did they do this?
When was that? That was late 70s, was it?
Yeah, like 69 or 70. Yeah, right.
Oh, right. No.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. But they see, like you in Canada, United States, we all have our code of either sex, violence, or whatever.
Gore.
Yeah, they didn't want him going down there as a mercenary for himself. He had
He has to be hired by the government.
Had to hire the government to rid the world of whiskey peddlers and gun sellers.
Yes.
Right.
And then the other ones that got me, and much later, were especially the Carbucci's, how many different endings of films there were that we never saw. You know, I mean, Minnesota Clay's got like 2 or 3 endings.
Yeah.
The Great Silence has 2 endings. And it's like, what the heck is this all about? You know, but
Does he live at the end of one of them, Tom?
which one?
The Great Silence.
Oh yeah, because Frank Wolf comes riding into town. He's supposed to have been dead, you know. He comes
I don't think
riding
I've
into
seen that
town,
one. How odd.
Just before Klaus, puts a bullet in the Great Silence guy, and
We
saves
call him
his life.
JLT, Tom.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
Let me-
different markets, would have had different standards, and I guess they thought this is just too downbeat. We need an escapist ending,
Right.
and they're pretty ridiculous.
Yeah.
When you watch them in context, straight after all the stuff that's come before.
Yeah, that second ending for Hellbenders is a trip. Anyway, let me ask you, from a collector standpoint, Kevin, do you collect anything spaghetti western? Posters, lobby cards, any photo boosters, anything in particular?
Not so much these days. I certainly did, 20 odd years ago when I was starting. I don't have I don't have a collection the size of Tom Betts, I'm sure, and some other people.
Oh, nobody does.
I'm sure they don't. But it's respectable. It's respectable. So I don't collect too much on those. It's mainly now. I'm still astonished that you can get some of these things on Blu-ray, and the quality that you can get on Blu-ray. So it's mainly when the movies come out.
Oh, so you upgrade your DVD collections then? I see.
That's mainly
That's
where
awesome.
my money goes in terms of spaghetti westerns, or maybe I'll find online, as we were saying earlier, somebody's done a composite version of a very rare movie. Now you can see it in widescreen or with subtitles or with an English track.
The best thing about the new releases are the interviews, the narrations, and stuff like that. But YouTube, I go on there and look at all the garbage stuff that I wouldn't pay $10 for a DVD or a video.
Yeah.
Franco Ciccio and stuff like that, but I haven't seen them. And you want to be a completist, so if it's on there, and they have fantastic prints. It's not like you're watching what you and I were saying, sixth version gray. These are pristine, and they're great.
It's like the red, the yellow, and the black, Tom?
Red, the yellow, and the, all those Dean Reed movies we suffered through to do that episode. And
Right.
Fernando Sancho stuff pops up, and that's the first one. Okay, we're talking about Mexican Westerns, or the Mexican Western Station. The first one I saw was Stagecoach of the Condemned with Fernando Sancho and Richard Harrison. And this thing comes on, I'm going, no, wait a minute, this isn't a Mexican Western. I know that guy. That's Fernando Sancho.
Yeah.
I said, this has to be a Spanish Western. And we didn't have anything to refer to. And I had to dig and call Bill Connolly the next day because he watched it. I said, what was that? He said, Stagecoach of the Condemned, because he had interviewed Richard Harrison, figured out what it was. But, oh, man.
Wow. Well, so go ahead.
Can I just ask you something as two American gentlemen?
Sure.
The early Italian European westerns, the ones that came before Fistful, a lot of them very much tried to be American B westerns. Would any of those have fooled you as a young viewer? Do you think any of those early ones you'd have looked at some of them, and even the ones that didn't have people like Edmund Purdom, the American stars that went over there, Alex Nichol. So some of the other ones where they had European actors, and they tried in terms of the costuming and the stories and everything to make them resemble cheap B westerns as much as possible. Would any of those have convinced you to any extent when you were young? And
I started watching. We were trying to get George Martin on. George Martin lives in Miami. And he had a hip injury and was hip transplant, whatever. So I started going on YouTube watching George Martin early stuff, and I was surprised that he goes back to 64, 63, some of those early ones, but there's nothing there that makes him stand out like Clint Eastwood, or the costuming, like you said, is all American. The lines are all American, basically, good guy, bad guy, white hat, black hat. The one that I liked, and it took me forever to see it, was Murrieta with Jeffrey Hunter.
Oh, yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah, that's a decent one. But again, if you didn't know it was made in Spain, you'd think it was an American movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
well, Tom, and not that I saw any of these when I was younger, but Pirates of Mississippi, right?
Yeah.
Conquerors of Arkansas. Was that the same movie? Yeah, you're right. They had the Edmund Purdom ones. They have a little taste of what's to come. I mean, there's a few spaghetti Italian or German westerns that are made in 62, 63. The kind of what's the one, Tom, with with Fernando Sancho with the tree in the background? Gunmen of the Rio Grande.
Oh yeah, with Guy Madison. But I don't like that because Guy Madison's supposed to be Wyatt Earp. First of all, he doesn't look like any Wyatt Earp I've ever seen. And as soon as he goes to Mexico, he changes his name from Wyatt Earp to Joe Jones or whatever because he's working undercover. So, I mean, why did you even say he's Wyatt Earp,
But the completist in us, I would add them. Like Tom, Tom wants me to add A Man Called Noon, and I just refuse to do it.
Okay, let me get into this with Kevin. Have you seen any of the DEFA or DEFA East German westerns with
I have,
Gatsko
yeah.
Mitic?
Yeah.
What do you think of those?
I like them. I mean, I've not seen a great many of them, and some of them only with the German track, so I can only appreciate them visually and in terms of the performances. But the Mitic ones, I think, are really strong. You know, not so much when they get into the sort of Jack London type
White Fang
adaptations.
movies, Jay. White Fang movies.
Oh, that's verboten here. White Fang, what are Canadian Mounties of the Canadian snow? Yeah, anything with snow.
Yeah.
We had a laugh with Robert Woods about that because he's in a couple of those.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
White Fang and the Hunter and White Fang and the Gold Diggers or whatever.
Yeah, I watched all those. I watched all those faithfully when I was interviewing Robert Woods.
The thing that I
Wow.
liked about the Gatsko Mitic movies were, even though they were East German propaganda movies, they were more true on how the gringos treated the Indians
Yeah,
than the Winnetou films. I mean, we weren't buddy with the Indians. They were trying to take their land, you know. And so they were much more grittier. The soundtracks were more like spaghetti westerns, and I really like them. To tell you the truth.
yeah. No, the heart was in the right place with those Mitic ones. He's the Apache chief and so on.
Mm-hmm.
It was that. I mean, that was one of the big discoveries actually. When I was first starting the book, I had no idea these things existed.
Me either.
I was obviously aware of Winnetou, the whole series, but to realise they were East German westerns, which took a different ideological perspective on the same material, was fascinating.
When I did the fanzine, I would send a copy over to, and I cannot think of his name to save my life, but he was in charge of the Karl May Museum. Younger guy, probably your age now. And he was blown away that we had anything like that on these films, because I would cover, even though Jay doesn't like them, the Winnetou films or whatever.
Oh, no, Tom, the Winnetou films are okay.
The Siege is mine now, but I would take anything that was European, and it was a Western.
Yeah.
And so he would send me books that they did, and every once in a while, and they were the hardbound like McFarlane books, you know. And one time he sent me something about Mustangs and something, and it was about the DEFA or Gatsko Mitic films, and that's what blew me away on how good these things were and how big a production value they were, you know. But yeah, it's fantastic stuff filming.
No,
But again,
Gatsko Mitic.
We got Ice Storm is the production company that releases them here in the States, I think. And I think they have English subtitles.
Yeah.
But the problem with the subtitles is they're all modern subtitles, so they'll use modern slang, you know. where you know they didn't use those words and stuff back in 1880, you know. It was funny.
No. Yeah, well, you guys outvote me. I'm not into those Gatsko Mitic films. Sorry, I just can't. It took me a while to come around to the Karl May ones.
The photography on those are fantastic. That's like 4K before 4K ever came in existence.
Right. And then again, I like Modelo and Tom doesn't. So the only thing I don't like about the film is, what's the star's name again? That blonde guy, Tom?
In Modelo?
Yeah, who's the star?
One that just died was Antonio Salinas, but that's not...
The guy who wears the headband. He takes a bath.
He was only in one or two spaghetti westerns. He passed away.
He's a little smug. He's a little smug in the film, but I love the soundtrack. Tom doesn't like the acid trip. I'm into it. It's better than Keown's soundtrack.
I like to Kill the Wickeds, which is the Rod Dana one, which is the same thing.
Ironically, Rod Dana's not a fan.
Your mic's getting scratchy.
Here we go again.
There we go. So this is what we put up with the first 20 episodes. His mic would go out or get scratchy, or at least to start doing side bets on what time in the
My mic would go out.
His mic would go out, yeah.
But anyway,
There you go. You're back.
we're back. Thank God it happened at the end.
You can cut that.
Right, I will. But anyway, Kevin, it's been an honor to have you here, to giving us a behind the scenes of what went into writing your book, which, as I said, is the Bible. of spaghetti western writing. All due respect to other writers out there, it just nothing comes close. It is the tome that sets the tone. Anything you want to reference to, it's not like, oh, I wish Kevin's book had that. No. So we praise you and thank you for writing it. It would be a big chunk would be missing in the history if not for that book, right, Tom?
Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. I told everybody I was going to write a book, which I mean, like you, Kevin, I dreamed about writing a book, and then yours came out. And I said, well, let me take a look at this. And then when I got
going to cancel that idea.
That idea, go on to something else. Won't be the
yeah,
writing
but
a book.
your project has been ongoing, though. I mean, you kept the flame alive for longer than anybody else. So.
Well, I've tried. I got tired of the fact that these films were, especially in the United States, downplayed as just garbage.
Jokes.
Only Westerns could be made by Americans, And I went to see Fistful of Dollars, and like you, I came out of the theater whistling the theme song. I don't know when the last time.
His wife couldn't get him to stop.
But it just blew me away. And I said, these things, first of all, the films aren't getting their due. There's so many actors that came out of these that either prolonged their career, started new careers, and now they've been influenced on the directors. I said they need somebody or something to keep these things going and to draw an interest to them. That was our objective, Ronnie and ours, And thankfully, over time, Tarantino and some of the other directors and stuff, Rodriguez picked up on these things. And now it's mainstream where it used to, and I like to call them spaghetti westerns. To me, that's an honor. Not Euro westerns, spaghetti westerns.
Yeah.
All right.
One last thing I found interesting and relates to what you were just saying is that when I first discovered there was a fan community for spaghetti westerns, especially when online forums came on stream, a lot of the fans of Euro westerns, spaghetti westerns, call them what you will, were quite hostile to American westerns. It was kind of the flip side, maybe in America, a lot of Western fans rejected the European version. A lot of fans of European westerns looked at US westerns and they're all too, they're all too straight, they're all too, black and white and so on and so on, which I found really interesting. There was a kind of a mutual hostility to an extent.
Well, you look at the American westerns in those days, and the guy always rode into a town. It was painted. All the buildings were white.
Yeah.
There was no horse manure in the streets. The women were walking around with parasols. I mean, and the spaghetti westerns to me look more like what it was really like the West would have been.
Right.
They didn't have trees and stuff. They put together the buildings out of their wagons that they came to the West in. The 2 barrels and a board was a bar.
Yeah, Tom, there was no Simone Blondell to look at, Tom.
That's right. There's nothing. They were all ugly as hell. That's the best thing about Fistful of Dollars. When he rides down that street in the beginning and all those ugly hags look out the window, they go, oh, my God, this is the real West.
Right?
Yeah.
That's funny. But anyway, once again, I want to thank Kevin Grant for joining us and with his insight onto his book and his take on spaghetti westerns. I also want to thank our fans for watching us on Facebook and YouTube, and also we're streaming on iTunes and Spotify and Anchor, the best of, I think. You can catch any of our best of complete, uncut.
Jay cut it down to only 3.
Yeah, right.
There's only 3 best ofs.
No, it's growing, Tom. There's about 20 of them.
20 of them?
But
okay.
yeah, so all of Tom's swear words are all uncut. They're in there. So you want to go check that out. Anytime you're on the road driving or exercising at home, put on your iPod or whatever and listen to these episodes. But anyway, we want to once again thank Kevin for coming down. And if you're ever in the States, there's a coffee or tea on me. So you let me know when. And we'll take care of that. Or Tom will have a barbecue at his place, at his ranch.
My ranch. We're going to the Autry, yeah.
Right, the Rancho Los Bets. But anyway, Tom, what do we always say to everybody when we say goodbye?
Adios, amigos.
Adios, amigos. Kevin, what do we say? What do you say when you say goodbye?
Cheers.
I say the same thing, because I grew up with the same movies. I always talk like that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you say adios. Okay, and I always say adios, compañeros. And we'll see you next time, everybody, on the Once Upon a Time. Oh, no, we can't wait. We don't call it anymore.
No, we have
It's
a new name.
the Spaghetti Westerns podcast. That's right. It's the alternate title, Tom.
Yep.
So we'll see you next time. Stay safe and goodbye.